Greetings! It is I, Tantus Naravan Jacovan, Lord and Emperor of the Jacovan Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue my discussion on the clans and bloodlines of Vampire the Masquerade. When we last left off, we were talking about yet another clan and their bloodlines associated with them. We're going to start talking about the Gangrel and all of their bloodlines. I'm only going to go over a number of them today, because the Gangrel have a lot of them, more than any of the other vampire clans. But let's start, of course, with the Arimaeus. Now, the Arimaeus are actually an all-female bloodline of Gangrel. They originated from this progenitor called Adasa, and they existed throughout the Dark Ages, only to effectively have died off and return in the Modern Ages under another vampire, Merica. Now, their disciplines have changed throughout the editions, but their current ones are Animalism, Potence, and Spiritus. Now, as I said, there are two versions of this bloodline that have existed. It is unsure if the current bloodline, the more modern bloodline, is in fact a direct descendant from it, and if any of the elders or direct blood from the original actually survive into it. But the original one is said to have been descended from this Valkyrie called Adsa. Now, Adsa was this powerful Valkyrie and traveled around the world, kind of journeying on a quest. Along the way, she ran into a Persian king who decided that the Persian king wanted to kill this Valkyrie. The Persian king sent his army against the Valkyrie, and they battled against the Valkyrie for 3 days. At the end of the 3rd day, though, the Valkyrie was slain. She was killed. Upon death, though, her goddess was effectively going to give her perfect afterlife, but she refused this gift and refused to head to the afterlife. She wished for a gift to be able to get revenge, but not revenge against the army which had beset her. She saw them as only being ordered by this king that would send an army against one woman. So she took 3 days, but in the end she slew the king, killed the king, defeated him. She basically haunted him and tormented him for all those days. She was once again given the option of possibly returning to the afterlife successfully, but she resisted this again. She could see that there were women across the world that required assistance in this way, that they would walk the nights and seek the blood of those that had harmed them, and the blood of others in order to sustain themselves. Basically, she would find a way to grant these women the opportunity for revenge against the men that had wronged them. Hence the bloodline. It is said that the bloodline eventually then merged back in with the Gangrel, and that is why it disappeared out. Now, in modern days, we saw the birth of the new version of this bloodline through this character, Merica. Now, Merica herself was disenfranchised, in particular with her clan, but even with the two factions to a degree. She had originally been associated with the Gangrel Anti-Tribu and with the Sabbat, but she was disenfranchised with the entire thing. She followed into the deep south of the United States, where she eventually came upon some mysticism through some ancient Native Americans and groups that were within that area. With it, she was able to awaken something deep within her bloodline, something that she believes is some of that connection to Adsa, and then for awaken her ability as an Arimaeus. Now, it is said that this bloodline, which is predominantly in the southern United States, is very well connected with spirits, but many of them just see them as an offshoot of the Gangrel Anti-Tribu. Regardless of which it really kind of functions as, Merica kept them sort of still in line with the Sabbat, but very private and separated from them. And unfortunately, this could probably spell their downfall. Around 1990, all of them disappeared. No one knows what really happened to all of them, but they all were gone, their havens abandoned. No one knows if they disappeared into some kind of spirit realm, if they were all killed off, or if something else entirely occurred. Maybe Merica migrated all of them to some other place entirely. Hard to say. Now, in the Dark Ages, they were a well-organized, nomadic group that would spread throughout Europe, doing their basic work. The thing is, none of them had a very common goal, though, but whenever one of their sisters, or someone that they perceived to be possibly becoming one of their sisters, was threatened, they would rise up as a group against them. In the modern nights, Merica has found that she is actually, in fact, sterile. Marika can't create more of her bloodline. Through whatever ritual that was that reawakened this power deep within, unfortunately caused this result. But she could repeat the ritual that had created her to bring more into her fold. And so this is the way that she supplements her numbers in the organization. This also means that she actually doesn't tend to have very well organized and doesn't really push any of the members into any sort of direction. Towards the final end of the Knights, it is said that she was beginning to organize the forces under her a little bit more, the Blood, but up until then, effectively, they had been pretty much for themselves within this new bloodline of all females, which she particularly kept the same from the old bloodline that she knew about. Now, in the Dark Ages, the group effectively fed from anybody and would travel everywhere. They were a nomadic group that would live within the wilderness and find ways to adapt to the wilderness, of course, usually using animalism. But there was some exceptions to what they would feed upon. They wouldn't feed on infants, they wouldn't feed on pregnant women, and they wouldn't feed on breastfeeding women. These were their only exceptions to the way that they would feed on people. Other than that, women, children, men, whatever else, they would hunt them down. Now, as I said, in the modern Knights, they're technically an artificial bloodline. In the modern days, of course, they're an artificial bloodline. So oftentimes the feeding habits depend on whatever vampire has been converted over to the bloodline itself. Now, in the Dark Ages, they embraced only women. Of course, there were stories of women who embraced a man because they fell in love with them, but these would be hunted down and basically driven to extinctions. Addis's gift is not to be for men. It's only for women. Now, this isn't to say that, in a way, there aren't just women. Because it is, if your spirit is that of a woman, and your body does not match your spirit, you're not held against this. As long as that core spirit deep within you is that of a woman, you could be accepted into this group. So, this is an interesting fact. And regardless of how you appeared before your embrace into them, you would be considered a full-fledged member of them once you were embraced into the group. Of course, in the modern Knights, it's the conversion ritual which changes them over to the bloodline. And oftentimes they look to those that are within their organization, but within the gangrel and their clans, that have found some frustration in disenfranchising with these groups and wish for things to change, so they'll be brought into them there. Now, their general weakness, especially from the Dark Ages, is they have a blood which prevents them from basically bonding with others in a way. What this really means is they can't make blood bonds, they can't make ghouls. They has actually evolved in the modern Knights that they, in fact, can't even sire child A, because of the nature of the ritual which is creating them in modern Knights. Now, the versions have changed over the years. They, of course, began in 2nd edition of Vampire, where they were introduced. They were expanded upon in V20, the 20th anniversary, when we saw the modern incarnation, and it was V20 Dark Ages that actually showed us the complete history of the clan when it introduced us to the original version of it, which existed back in the Dark Ages. Now, let's move on to the next bloodline of the Gangrel, the Akunase, one of the legacies of Libon, the groups of vampires within Africa. They have the disciplines of Abause, animalism, and fortitude. They take their name from the wise spider of many mythology within African mythos. They are in fact pursuers of knowledge and see that as the most important thing for them to come across. They tend to be counsels to other of the legacies and other vampires from those legacies. They themselves are very loosely organized and spread throughout all of Africa, always in the pursuit of knowledge. This actually also means that because of their nature of wishing to pursue knowledge, those that come to Africa, even non-Africans that come to Africa seeking knowledge, can be embraced into their bloodline. They see those that seek the knowledge, and especially seek the knowledge of the land of Africa, as one with them, one with their concept. Now, their weakness is actually very similar to the Gangrel weakness itself. Their weakness has them become more animalistic, similar to them. But rather than with the frenzy that the Gangrel get, they gain more animalistic characteristics as they gain more knowledge, especially knowledge of an area. If they particularly study an area very deeply, they'll take on an animal aspect of some kind of creature of that area. So if they're studying a region or something in a region, whatever animal that may live there, they will take on aspects of that. Now, the last bloodline I want to talk about today is the Anda, a bloodline within the Mongolian tribesfolk during the Dark Ages. Now, they had the disciplines of animalism, fortitude, and protein. They are said to descend from Dabul the Brave, who is said to be a child of an earth goddess. Now, the stories say that there was a number of bandits from the Zhou dynasty which sought to capture the goddess and her family. Dabul, being the son of the goddess, decided to fight against them and allow his family to escape, which they did, including the goddess, who thought Dabul would be slain. Instead, at the end of the said battle, in which he did claim a victory, protecting his family, he found himself not dead, but cursed to walk the earth, and required the blood of the living in order to survive. Effectively, he became a vampire. Now, during the Dark Ages, they actually lived openly with the families that they came from. People knew what they were. These creatures, the Anda, would effectively be these protectors of the various tribal families they were members of, and travel with them as they would, nomadically travel across the steppes, protecting them from various dangers. The Anda then also did deal with the various supernatural creatures within the regions, things like the Kitsune and other eastern shape changers, and also the Kwaijin, effectively the eastern vampires. Things changed, though, when the reign of Genghis Khan began. He united the Mongolian tribesfolk into a massive horde and traveled and conquered the land. The Andaf traveled with him and began to basically fight against their supernatural enemies to great degree and claim victories against them, rooting them out from many places, killing many, dominating other places. The Anda actually offered Genghis Khan their blood, but he declined to join with them. He declined. Now, the Anda then, of course, gained superiority over the entire region of Asia for some time. This included up through Kublai Khan's reign, but then during that reign, a decline actually began to occur. Effectively, with the decline of the Mongolian Empire during this time, so did the Anda's reign over all the other supernatural creatures begin to decline too. During the Ming Dynasty, the Kwaijin actually began a reverse purge of the Anda, basically finally driving them out. And it is said around 1388, some of the last ones were in fact killed off. Now, it is believed that there are some that survives, that some of the elders saw the writing on the wall, including Dabul the Brave, and found ways to basically sleep beneath the steppes, hide deep beneath the Mongolian plains in order to basically be in Topor and survive into the future. Though how many actually have or not is impossible to say during this time. It is, of course, said that Dabul and his blood, his kin that did survive, will rise during the final nights and especially during whatever apocalypse is to come, in order as one of the signs of it, that they will return to the Mongolia, where they belong. Now, they were very loosely organized, intended to be with their sort of tribal nomadic families, but on the night of a new moon, those that were within a region would get together to basically discuss the various threats that are against them and everything that's going on. They would be, of course, be led over by the eldest of all of them, who would become the Khan of the group, who would be the one that all of them would basically give their effective fealty to within this organization. The idea of this authority to this one was very important. There are exceptions to this, though. There were some that were too depraved or monstrous for even any kind of grouping here, and tended to be shunned out of both their families and of the organization of this council that would get together. These depraved Anda would basically wander the nights hunting as they could, but it's really hard to find stuff within the steppes, especially if you don't have that family. The family acted as a herd to these vampires, a way for them to survive on these massive steppes and empty wastes that were far and few between the people. And the people themselves, if you would find them, might be protected by another of your kind that does not want you to feed on them. They are said to either have died off or gone into Topor, and it is assumed that actually the majority of the remaining Anda that exist are probably these here. These depraved and terrible ones, these monsters sleeping beneath the steppes. And that is one of the reasons that their rising is so dangerous and considered so apocalyptic. Now, they saw themselves as spirit warriors, powerful warriors that, of the spiritual variety, that in fact Everything about them was based upon this pledge of a loyalty to that was elder to you, that was superior to you, and that this bond was very important. It's one of the reasons, actually, that they had such a united front. Now, unfortunately, though, the elders, many of them, did not follow humanity. And in fact, it means that a lot of them didn't also. That this sort of like their eldest were not followers of humanity. And so down the line, they tended not to also. This is another sign of why some of them could become depraved and monstrous, because it depends on the path they actually chose to end up following, not humanity. Now, they tended to embrace within their kind of blood that they had, within their bloodlines. Effectively, though, what they would do is they would have the council of those within a region come together and decide upon someone that is within their entire purview to become a member of their blood. Once they would decide upon this person, they would bring them in, embrace them, and then teach them everything they needed to know to survive. They would stay with this group until they were ready. They would have to learn important skills like earth melding, because they're on the steppes. Where are you going to haven? There's nowhere to protect yourself from the sun during the day, really. So earth melding tended to be very important to them. And of course then, once they learned these skills, they'd be allowed to join with their family and travel with them once again. Their direct family. The thing about this is it creates an important bond between the council that you have in these regions and those new members to them. A bond that keeps them actually loyal to this group and in fact almost eventually becoming a member of them in a way. So this is how the evolution of these sort of like grouping areas, these sort of circles within a region existed because they could have this tight-knit bond that they were forming between the groups. Now, the Anda's weaknesses have actually changed over the years. Originally, their weakness was just that they had a compulsion not to sleep in the same area for long periods of time. Effectively, they had the compulsion to move, to be nomadic. And that has evolved slightly over the years. But in the most modern incarnation of their rules, they've even altered it a little bit too. They've added a little bit more to it. Now, they also have some trouble that their road rating is in fact lower during the hours after sunset and an hour before sunrise. Effectively, they're limited to acting like they would be acting during the day during those 2 hours. They've got less of the night that they can function at 100%. So that's it for today. I introduced you to 3 of the bloodlines of the Gangrel. First, I introduced you to the Arimaeus, a group of female-only Gangrel, well, bloodline from them, that originally said the first version of it descended from Valkyries, and were those to avenge the women. Of course, a second version existed in the Deep South in the US that was brought about by America, who found a way to awaken this tiny sliver of a bloodline said to have originated from the original Arimaeus, and bring it back to the surface. But she could only do so through this ritual. She could only create more through this. And they've disappeared now. To where? Who can say? Then I talked about the Akunase, one of the legacies of Liban, who are seekers of knowledge. They are counsels to others. And they are one of the legacies that is actually willing to embrace non-Africans. If you go there and you seek knowledge within Africa, and you are a knowledge seeker, and you respect Africa itself, you could be as good as a member of them. You're just as fine as anyone else then. You have that spark that they seek. Finally, I talked about the Anda, a Dark Ages bloodline from Mongolia. They were Mongolian tribes that lived openly as vampires among their families. They were protectors of these families, and in turn, their families were their herd. It was an incredible bond that existed up through Genghis Khan and Kublai Khan. But with the decline of the Mongolian Empire and the rise of the Ming Dynasty, they were pretty much wiped out. It's hard to say how many survive, but it is said that there are those that sleep beneath the steppes to awaken on the end of the world. Perhaps some could awaken before then? It's impossible to say, but they have hinted at what it truly means for them to awaken. But if you have any questions, comments, anything you want to say, anything you think I left out, please leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. It's just to grow the channel, the empire, the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you can always check out my Patreon, link in the description below. But regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.